Hi there. Welcome to the Raven's Call. I'm Eric Wordweaver Sjerven, Gothi of the Ridgar folk, and I'd like to welcome you to the show. This is a show where I ramble on about different heathen-related subjects. Just kind of whatever strikes my fancy at the time, sets my mind on fire. This is a platform where we'll usually discuss a lot of like intro heathen stuff and then some deeper heathen stuff and all off the wall. Just depends on where I'm going at the time. Bit of a UPG warning at the top of this. I'm not a hardcore recon. I'm not a fluffy bunny. I'm somewhere in the middle of things. I take a very middle-of-the-road organic approach to heathenry. I'm a modern heathen. I would not call myself a historical heathen. I'm more of a modern heathen in the respect that I'm trying to forge something in the today, fed by tradition and by research. But it's all very much my own thing. So the views reflected in these videos are going to be my own. They're not necessarily the views of my tribe or even of greater heathenry as a whole. They may only reflect my own inner thoughts. And so please, take them for what they are, and don't think that I am one of those that's going to say this is the right way, only way. No. My big thing is not my hall, not my call, to each their own in how they do things. So that being said, everything in my videos is pretty much UPG, but backed with some research and things like that. It's personal insight. So, and I should probably do a video just on the concept of UPG one time, just for gits and shiggles. So before we get started, down below, you're going to find the subscribe button. Please click that. Give it a thumbs up to all the videos, ding the bell, all that stuff. The more you interact with my videos, the more you're going to see like them, and the more my subscriber count goes up and the view count goes up on these individual videos and the thumbs up, the more the YouTube algorithms realize, hey, this is something that people might actually be interested in. So I like to kind of, get this out there and let people see it for those that are interested. And those that are not, will just simply pass by it, and it won't be a blip on their radar. So please, if you would, interact. If you're listening to the audio version of this in podcast form, I do use Anchor.fm to do an audio podcast version of my stuff. So if you prefer that over the video, then please seek it out on, I think I'm on like 8 major or more major podcast formats, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, things like that. So I'm out all over the place. You can find these just by searching for The Raven's Call, and you should be able to find me on any of those venues. Just look for Eric Wordweaver Sjerven and, The Raven's Call by Eric Wordweaver Sjerven, and you should be good to go. So please, if you are watching those, then interact with them however is appropriate on your particular podcatcher. And leave reviews where appropriate. So furthermore, if you guys are interested in supporting the channel at all, please go out and look at my book, The Saga of Bjorn Thorolfson. It can be found on Amazon and on the Kindle ebook shop. You can find the links for those down in the description below. They are heathen storybooks. It's a heathen storybook which follows a central family and kind of imparts some of my views and things like that. All the sales of the book go to support the channel. So that's there. I'm trying to save up to eventually buy a laptop, so maybe I can do some real world kind of editing and stuff like that eventually. So anyway, it's there. Give it a look, see if you like it, and if you enjoy the book, please leave a review. Now, before we get started, obviously, if you guys watched the last couple of episodes, I was feeling kind of sickly. not even gonna lie, I got sick as a dog after filming those last videos. And ironically, I was filming some of the setup stuff for episode 100, which is coming up, which is a big blowout thing where I've got a bunch of different people that have submitted videos, and then I do my own spiel. So it's like an episode and a half of just really cool content about heathen artisans. So that's coming up on episode 100. Be on the lookout for that. I think the projected release date for that is something like October 9th, if everything follows schedule. And one of the big things on there is a big debut by a heathen I know who did a really great and beautiful blowout video, and this is his kind of world debut for it, and he's chomping at the bit to see it go live. So it's coming. It'll be there. You guys will see it, and it's epic. It's cool. So be on the lookout for that. But yeah, immediately after filming all of that and the setup stuff for that, I got sick as a dog. So I'm still kind of pale in the face, maybe a little flushed at points, and maybe a little bit lethargic, but I'm bouncing back. So for those that showed worry or interest in me on Facebook, I'm okay, guys. I'm over it. Everything's cool. So we're going to rock along. Now today, we're going to jump headlong into today's subject. This is one that struck me the other day as I was dealing with some stuff at work. Now, for those of you that don't know, I work in the field of social work. I'm not going to get into specifics just because of the confidentiality nature of what I do, but I do work in the field of social work, and with that I run into a lot of families dealing with the system, as it were. And I see a lot of things that happen to families and the results of things that happen to families and whatnot. And we've talked a lot in the cultural aspect of things before about Frith, about the obligations that come along with Frith, that are part of Frith, that are the basis of Frith. The establishment of Frith bond is based on mutual obligation and the upholding of those obligations. The trust that builds within a family is that intricate understanding, that inherent knowledge that obligations, the essential obligations will be upheld, the obligations that you won't harm each other, that you won't betray one another, that you will be there for each other, support each other when need be. These things are there. And we've talked some about toxic individuals in the past and how those people that will betray Frith and need to be driven out or sever bonds, how even within family members, within like immediate family, Frith can be sundered through ill deed and action, or through negligence, or through poisoning over time, toxicity kind of things. So today I want to talk about an egregious violation of Frith. Now you can understand, working in the generalized field that I work in, my degree of course is in psychology, but I work within the social work system. I see a lot of domestic violence, and mostly domestic violence and drug abuse is mostly what I see. And by domestic violence, I don't just mean partner on partner violence, but like partner on, or parent on child, paramour on child, paramour on partner kind of thing. I see a lot of violence in the home. And that is a very real thing in this world. It's something that's always been, and I feel that it's something that will probably always be in some element, simply because it is a darker underside of humanity, but it is there nonetheless. And so one of the things that strikes me a lot is that there is this phenomenon within, especially children dealing with abusive parents, and especially with spouses dealing with abusive partners, this tendency to latch onto and to excuse and to feel obligated to the abuser. And that is a very real thing. It is a very, very real thing. Now, psychologically, there's a lot of areas that we delve into in this from a therapeutic standpoint on divesting the self from the abuser in these situations. It's very much about finding that sense of self-worth, the sense of self in and of itself, because a lot of times when you come into an abusive relationship, what happens is the abuser slowly, over time, erodes the sense of self of the other individual, the abusee, and whether it be the child or a partner or whatever. And it's not, when I say partner specifically, because it's not just husband on wife. You would not believe the amount of wife on husband violence that I see. Plus same-sex marriages, you end up, or relationships in general, you end up with similar situations. It doesn't matter. Anytime you get into a relationship between people, there can be an abuse of power. There can be abuse, whether it's emotional abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse, whatever it may be. There are a myriad of ways that this can play out. And nobody talks about this from a heathen perspective. We talk about it from a psychological perspective. The damage that occurs when someone who is in a position of trust and power within a relationship abuses that, betrays trust. And then the damage that that does to trust, not just that individual, the abusee's trust towards the abuser, but also their ability to trust anyone else, because that is a severe break. That's something that breaks down to the core. Now, some people deal with it better than others because they're able to compartmentalize. And a lot of times people think they're dealing with this, when in reality what they're doing is actually compartmentalizing this, shutting it off, and not dealing with it. They're rationalizing it, shoving it to the back, either excusing the behavior for the individual or simply believing that through sheer force of will they can overcome it, or that they'll be fine, They see it as a form of weakness in themselves to succumb to this, or it's embarrassing to come out about it, some fear for themselves in talking about domestic violence with anyone in a professional field or anyone outside of their hearth because of the fear of repercussion with the abuser. And these are very real concerns. I mean, I'm not going to tell anybody that's in an abusive relationship that, yeah, of course, you can step out and talk to whoever you want, and they're not going to do anything to you when you go home. No. It's not that simple. And I realize it's not that simple. Anybody that is a professional in the field will tell you, we know it's not that simple. When we tell you to get out of those kind of relationships, we mean to do so safely. When you're going to come out and talk about it, you need to be in a safe environment where you can talk about these things and then flee to safety. Part of the thing that a lot of professionals will do is help to concoct a plan to get that person to safety, because until that person is removed from the abusive setting, then it's just going to continue, and no healing can be done while they're still in that moment of trauma, because this is very much a trauma incident. Each of these is an individual trauma that builds up to chronic trauma over time. There's chronic trauma, acute trauma, and complex trauma. This actually falls more into the complex trauma area with regards to how trauma-informed care is done within modern pop psychology at the moment. But let's talk about this from a heathen perspective real quick, okay? Now, I talked before about Frith. Frith is obligation between individuals within a social construct, within the hearth specifically. I mean, we're talking about you build Frith with those within your inner circle and some, out irradiation kind of out from that. You share weird with these people. You establish into Frith relationships with them, where you establish expected obligations of one another, that if those obligations are not upheld, then there will be repercussions upon the relationship. Just like with any oath, failure to uphold that oath then damages that relationship, and schuld needs to be paid, or schild, however you want to pronounce it or spell it. There's a million different ways depending on there's like a half dozen different ways depending on which aesthetic that you're coming from. But essentially, it's the recompense paid, the payment to make right of this error that has occurred, this betrayal of trust, this failure to uphold one's obligation. And so, when you're talking about an oath in a ritualized format, well then, yeah, it's simple to set shield and things like that. When you're talking about Frith within the home, it's not quite so simple to set out what is an acceptable shield, especially when it is something like abuse, because abuse is not a one-off thing. Abuse is not something that just happens once or occasionally. Abuse is it becomes a culture within the home. It is a habitualized response by the aggressive individual within the home. There's a lot of psychological stuff that goes into this, and anybody that is dealing with this, anybody that's going through this, I urge you to speak with someone, preferably someone in a professional capacity that maybe has the capacity to help with these kind of scenarios. There are a lot of hotlines out there. There are help groups, support groups. Please seek out these professional settings. Nothing that I say in here is going to subvert that in any way, shape, form, or fashion. If anything, it's going to help to empower the ability to seek out those resources. I do not encourage you to try to handle this on your own specifically. I do encourage you to reach out and get help, simply because the traps are so complex when it comes with an abusive individual, especially dealing with someone who is particularly toxic and has gaslighting type of behaviors, where they make you question your own sanity, your own competence, your own ability, and will convince you that you are dependent upon them and that you are incapable of leaving them because you will never make it on your own without them. Okay? Now, I'm not going to get into specifics of physical abuse in this, so I know that can be kind of triggering for some individuals. Just the concept alone of dealing with abuse within a home setting can be kind of triggering for people. So I'm going to try and kind of keep things to a more conceptual level to make it more palatable for those individuals that may have gone through this before or are going through this right now. But I do understand from experience within my working field, because I've been in my field now for 14 years. I've seen a lot of it. I do understand what you guys are going through. I see it on a daily basis. So, and I see the outcomes a lot of times too. Frith within the home is a set of obligations, and abuse within the home is an egregious violation of Frith. Egregious violation of Frith. Now, I'm not saying like different relationships play out different ways. It would be erroneous to say that any one template fits any one relationship. I know relationships where two people are combative in nature, but they know how far they can go. They will argue, they will yell, they will holler, they may even, escalate to the point of throwing some things about the room. But I've watched these individuals. I've seen this play out, and I know there is still Frith there, because Frith can absorb a great number of things, and within this relationship, what they have established are specific boundaries that neither one of them will cross, and as such, they are free to express themselves within the realm of those boundaries. Now, this is not most relationships. These are more outlier type relationships that are more loud and boisterous in nature. I know a few, and to try and apply a generalized template or aesthetic to them would be erroneous, because a lot of people will look at it and be like, there's got to be abuse going on in that home. I'm like, no, you don't understand. They will sit there and holler and yell at each other and everything, and then in 10 minutes, they're going to be fine. All they're doing is just blowing off steam. They know what line not to cross. I guarantee you that if they cross the line, that something will change in that, and they will pull back in these specific relationships. There are relationships where that doesn't happen, and people don't know their boundaries. People don't respect their boundaries. And that's a key thing about obligation within Frith. One of the Frith obligations is the obligation of respecting the boundaries of those within the relationship, those within this social construct. Because a relationship is just that. It is a social construct. It is an agreement between two individuals to enter into this partnership and to share their lives together. It's not something that is independent of order. It is not something that is devoid of the social contract. It is based on a social contract. Any relationship is. It just varies. And of course, because there are emotions, because it's, feel-good stuff, it doesn't always necessarily come across as being this thing. You're not going to sit down and do like Sheldon and come up with a relationship agreement. Big Bang Theory reference. Sorry, I'm a nerd. You're not going to come up with a relationship agreement and sit down and pen all of this out, necessarily. Some people will. And if you think about it, when you actually formalize a relationship into a marriage, the marriage vows are very much that. It is a formalization of the obligations that have been established within the Frith of the relationship. You're born into Frith with the family. They're born into obligation, and the family they incur obligation through your birth and to the family. There's some automatic obligations that are there by birth. That's where you get into the parent-child situation, which is kind of a different aspect altogether. But still, there can be betrayal or neglect of those particular aspects. And then what you end up with is a whole explosive element in and of itself, similar to what we're talking about here. When you're talking about a relationship, this social contract that is established is frequently unspoken. Like most relationships, like most friendships, you understand. You're going to respect each other's boundaries. You are not going to cross certain lines. You are going to respect a person's privacy and space within the realm of what boundaries are set by that individual. So much of it is respecting boundaries. So much of it is respecting boundaries. And when you have a relationship where one partner does not respect the boundaries of another, despite how they might set them, despite how they might flag them, then you end up in kind of a toxic situation where one person keeps crossing a line that they needn't cross. And so the outcome of that is particularly negative. But it is something that can be overcome if that person is willing to learn to recognize and respect those boundaries. Now, when it comes to abuse, though, we're talking about someone who's blown away these boundaries. We're talking about a situation where someone systematically has eroded these boundaries to the point that the abused individual no longer maybe even recognizes where their own boundaries exist. All too often, I deal with individuals who no longer recognize the abuse in and of itself. I mean, they see the physical abuse, but they're unable to see the emotional abuse or the psychological abuse because they've been worn down so long. It's established a new norm in their minds to such an extent that they can't see it. They can't deal with it. They can't process it. And it's a sad thing to see. And what this person ends up doing is becoming a shell of themselves. Their soul begins to be damaged deep within. And if you've gone back and looked at my soul complex videos, you'll understand kind of my complex view of the soul. And I very much think there are elements of the soul complex that become damaged by that, by those kind of spiritual attacks, as well as the physical attacks that go along. Because there's psychological, spiritual, and physical attacks that all occur at the same time. And any one act of abuse can be a combination of all three, depending on what's at play. So, yes, it is an egregious violation of Frith. Abuse is something that is at its core devastating and breaking of Frith. So, if an individual finds themselves in a situation where they are part of an abusive relationship, then I highly urge you to find a way to get some support, whether it be through support groups, through a therapist, through social work of some kind, through some kind of outside assistance that will safely allow you to exit that situation and to establish a safe place. Please do so. And understand, this is my point within the heathen context, is that the sense of obligation that people have towards their abuser is that Frith obligation, because they have not given up on Frith. They have not recognized yet that Frith has been shattered. They do not recognize that Frith bond between them has been cut in twain, has been poisoned, has been frayed to the point of snapping, that has just been shattered. Because these people have betrayed that trust. They have betrayed the obligation and as such have shattered trust. They have shattered the Frith within that hearth. One will still feel obligations towards their abusers. That is not unusual. That's actually very normal in these situations. That is what keeps people around. They feel obligations because it's the family. And they keep telling themselves a narrative in their head that they belong here, that they shouldn't tell anyone because this is family business and it needs to stay within the family. That if they leave and they tell, well, then they're betraying the family. They're betraying their spouse. And this is not the case, because in an instance such as this where abuse occurs, that person has already broken Frith within the home. They've already broken the Frith of the hearth, and they have already betrayed you. At which point you are not still beholden to the obligations that were set forth before. Not to that particular individual within the hearth. Now don't get me wrong, kids complicate things because you do still have Frith obligations to the children. But is not one of those Frith obligations also to see to the safety and well-being of those children? The children who are dependents upon you are unable to see to their own safety and well-being. They trust that you will fulfill your obligation to keep them safe and to guide them and to take care of them. And that is very, very difficult when you're in a position where you can't necessarily take care of yourself. Again, why support structure is so necessary. Tribes are a fantastic thing for this. If you have a tribe that you have built this support within and this infrastructure with, and you have that comfort with another individual within the tribe, this won't necessarily, but it may give you the safe outlet to be able to discuss with someone. I say may because it's not necessarily going to always be the case. I don't want you to take this and think that just because you're in a tribe, you can necessarily go and talk to anyone within the tribe about what's going on and get the support that you need. Every tribe is different, and I cannot say that, you know, the tribe to which you belong is necessarily built that strongly. Now, ideally speaking, yes, you should be able to have a position within the tribe where you have someone to speak to, someone else of the same gender who you can go to and seek advice from, because there are going to be repercussions for the individual, the abuser, within the structure of the tribe, ideally. I keep coming back to these kind of wishy-washy terms when it comes to tribe, because there's a lot of people who call themselves tribe that are not what I would qualify as tribe. They're not in that position where they're structured in such a way that there would be those kind of repercussions. There may be an abusive kind of culture to the tribe, depending on the cultural aesthetic that the tribe adheres to, particularly in some of the more extremist views within heathenry, on either the left or right. Just depends. Essentially, what it boils down to in the end is that abuse is a betrayal of Frith. When Frith is betrayed to that level, you are no longer beholden to the individual to whom you previously held those obligations. As such, you are within your rights, within Frith, to step out and seek assistance and seek help. You are not betraying Frith by seeking help. If anything, you are honoring your Frith to children by seeking their safety. You are also honoring your Frith obligations to your family, to your clan, to seek out your own safety and your own survival, because you are tied to that clan, and your safety and your survival are part of your Frith obligations with your clan, to an extent. Similarly, the clan should be Frith beholden to you to help you out in these instances. Doesn't mean that they always will, especially if there's a culture of ongoing abuse within that clan culture. Nothing's simple, guys. I realize that. Trust me, I get nothing is simple. No two abuse cases look the same. I have discovered that from exposure to way too many. And I'm almost leery to kind of put these videos out there, but in a lot of ways, I feel like they need to be heard. They're gutsy, they're daring, because I'm talking about something that's a touchy subject for a lot of people. And I put an article up on a website not too long ago with my, encouraging people to seek assistance within their tribe as far as dealing with depression, etc., etc., etc. And I was kind of lambasted on this particular site because, well, internet trolls will be internet trolls, and they do what they do. But people even went so far as to call it dangerous, and it's the same thing as the depression videos that you've seen on my channel already. It's the same content. I just put it into an article form. Sorry, I'm bumping my cable there. And so nothing changed. It's all the same content, and yet it was not well received, to say the least. Even though everything there, I ran the article past other professionals in my field, in my own office, and they were like, yeah, dude, you're on par here. So, all that to say, I recognize that these are not cookie cutter situations. They're not. No two situations are the same. But the one thing I can tell you is no one needs to suffer this. No one needs to go through this. And it is something that flies all over me because it is an egregious violation of Frith. All right? If you are one of the ones that is abusing someone with your own home, you are violating Frith. You have betrayed them and violated Frith. If you are an individual who is being abused within your hearth, you have been violated. Your Frith has been violated. And as such, you are within your own rights to seek your own safety and your own well-being. You're not beholden to the same level that you were before. You're not beholden at all after a certain extent. So, take all this to heart, that I'm telling you, from somebody who works in the field as well as a heathen, that this is from a heathen's perspective, one of the things that holds people back the most from going out and seeking help is that sense of obligation to the abuser. specifically even a sense of obligation to the family to put up with the abuser for the cohesion of the family. However, once Frith has been violated to that extent, it is almost impossible to get it back. I'm not saying that it is impossible, but it's very, very, very difficult. And even then, the trust levels will never be what they were before. Okay? Similarly, you have an obligation to the other members of the family to seek the safety and well-being of the family. So keep those things in mind. Understand that once Frith is violated, you can get out. You can seek safety. That is fine. You should never be afraid to seek your own safety. I'm not doing this to alienate anybody. I'm not doing this to point fingers at any individual specifically. This is for those individuals that are suffering abuse. It is okay to find safety. You are within your rights. You are acting as a heathen to seek out safety, especially the well-being of your family. All right? So, I'm going to let this set, guys. I've rambled on for a little while here. This is a heady subject, and it's one that I expect some mixed reviews on. It's one that I could actually go on about for hours, simply because of the complexity of abuse, neglect situations. And we didn't even get into some of the aspects of neglect. We didn't talk about specifically like child abuse and things like that, because that's a whole different ballgame. I mean, that is that's specifically the field in which I work. And that is a heady thing. When you talk about a child who is brought into this world and sees from a fundamental age, from a very, very foundational age, the destruction of these Frith obligations, the failure, the obliteration of any concept of normalcy within the obligations of Frith. I mean, we already have issues with that, with the degradation of the family unit in modern day. Not to say as far as, the exact formation of it, but in the generalized phenomenon we see in the Western world of the over-focus on individual and career and the eschewment of culture, of any kind of familial unit, I mean, these things are broken down and degraded to a point that they're not valued in the way that they used to be, and they should be. And because of that, I think in a lot of ways, the abuse and neglect cycle has gotten worse, significantly because these people don't recognize the obligations of Frith the way they used to. People enter into relationships that it's an ongoing thing. They enter into relationships that end up being mere facades of relationships, and then end up in a toxic spiral. But it's complicated and it's complex, and it is not everyone. It's specific situations that I am referring to, and I'm trying not to go on another hour-long ramble about things. I just want you guys to understand. I do think about these things in all these different areas and all these different venues. And with my focus here recently on depression and things like that, I wanted to touch on another area of the world that I see on a daily basis from a heathen's perspective, which is something that we don't get to talk about very much. And that is that domestic violence is, and abuse and neglect in general, is a violation of Frith. Because what is neglect but failure to uphold obligations within the Frithstead? So there you have it. Do with that what you will, but I very much urge you, if you are in a position where you are dealing with abuse and neglect, seek help. Safely seek help from individuals that are trusted in preferably professional areas, so that you can get the assistance you need and that you can find your own safety. So, thank you all. I'm going to leave this one here, and we'll come back next week with hopefully something a little bit more up and chipper. This was a pretty heavy episode, but it was fresh on my mind in dealing with a lot of things here through my work, and I felt like it needed to be said from a heathen's perspective. This is something that I see. So, hail to you all, thank you, and may your hearth fires burn bright. Okay. Let's see. I hate the noise of putting on the microphone. Yeah, I'm getting over being sick. I was very, very sick for about, the better part of this week. And so now I'm finally to a point where I'm feeling halfway normal again. I'm still fatigued, and I think a little flushed in the face, but that's okay. It'll be alright. My hair's a mess. It's windy out today. Crazy. I really should have braided it again. I'm dry, though. Anyway. Alright, let's see about... Just kick it back. It doesn't need to be on the shoulder. Alright, let's see about doing a video. This one's going to be on domestic violence. And this is one that... heavy stuff. Heavy stuff. So we're going to see if we can make it work. No, we're gonna. This is a show where I ramble on. Something in my eye. No, it's just dry. All right, let's try that again. In 3, 2, 1. Let's jam. Funny games, funny games, funny games. Feels good to be starting to get back to my normal. Ooh, hair tie on the hand. Doesn't need to be there for the video. That would be distracting. Nobody wants that hair off the microphone. And we're going to talk about domestic violence. And we're going to hope that this one goes okay. All right? Otherwise, I don't know. All right. So we're live in 3, 2, 1. Let's jam.